So, us guys can be simple sometimes. A lot of us want emotional connection, loyalty, understanding, intimacy, people we can trust, etc. But at the same time, we struggle to actually talk about what we feel. I mean, what can I say? It's fucking difficult sometimes. And when we finally do open up, it's usually after days, weeks, months, maybe even years sometimes. Do y'all ever feel like there's just something in us that causes us to clam up whenever anything remotely connected to emotions comes up? I mean, why does this happen in the first place? And why do so many guys like me struggle to open up emotionally? Is it biology, society, fear, pride, or is there something deeper? Possibly something that goes over most people's heads. I'm gonna aim this video at guys, but I mean, even if you're not one, feel free to sit back.
The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
Like me, you have parents, or at least I hope you do. I mean, if you grew up as a boy, there's most likely certain messages that stick out at you. Things like, never show emotion, or you're not a girl, don't do this, blah blah blah. As for how young boys or guys receive this, other kids their age or adults sometimes tell them directly, or maybe it's something that they pick up subconsciously. It's usually hella subtle too, to the point where others don't realize the message they're trying to convey. We learn through reactions, we cry and people laugh, and if you get scared, you're probably gonna get called dramatic and be called weak. We get hurt and we're simply told to man up. We show even a little bit of vulnerability and people start to treat us differently. As I'm trying to prove, however, even small moments like this stick. For example, a boy falls and cries. One guy tries to comfort him and another dude says, "You're fine." And that might sound harmless. Heck, it might even sound harmless to me as I'm saying this out loud myself. But over repeated years, it creates a message that pain should be hidden. Lots of men were or are emotionally trained through embarrassment, not necessarily abuse or cruelty or anything overly, violent, just repeated signals that vulnerability somehow lowers value. And you know what the scary part is? These signals don't just come from other guys. Sometimes we get shit from our friends, family, girlfriends, sometimes on social media, or even just society in general. Now, if you're following me, based on this information, guys quickly notice a few things. Confidence getting rewarded, emotional control getting respected, weakness getting remembered, etc. So many of us just slowly build emotional armor without even realizing it. And after enough years, that armor stops feeling fake. It starts feeling like our actual personality. Another thing people don't understand is that a lot of guys aren't necessarily hiding emotions as much as we're literally struggling to process or convey them in a meaningful manner. Not because we're dumb or that we don't care about them, but because emotional communication itself is technically a skill. And guess what? Skills, need practice. Some people are good at certain skills off the bat, which is, I guess, what you would consider talent. But I mean, if someone spends years suppressing feelings instead of discussing them truthfully, then eventually they lose emotional vocabulary. So instead of being straight up, for example, and saying, "I feel insecure" or "I'm afraid of disappointing people," it becomes, "I'm just tired," full stop. Instead of saying things like, "I feel genuinely emotionally neglected," we just get used to it and say, "It is what it is." A lot of us convert emotions into simpler, safer forms. Anger becomes easier than sadness most of the time, and keeping our mouth shut becomes much easier than honesty. Emotional detachment becomes easier than vulnerability, and over time, some guys genuinely stop understanding themselves. They know something is wrong and they literally feel it in their bones, but they just can't put the feeling into their own words. That's part of why some guys literally explode like volcanoes after just bottling things up for years. It's not necessarily because what finally ticked them off was, necessarily massive. It's because of like 50 other different things that have been pent up that were never processed beforehand. A lot of men grow up feeling like love is conditional. Not always consciously, but on a subconscious level. They feel valuable when they succeed, when they're useful, when they're confident, when they're stable. So vulnerability itself can start feeling dangerous. Because if your worth is tied to competence in some way, then emotional struggle feels like the opposite of that, failure. That's why some guys straight up disappear when they're depressed. They isolate themselves, they ghost people, stop replying. Not necessarily because they hate those people in question, but because they're ashamed and they don't want to be seen struggling. A lot of guys feel pressure to always appear composed, especially around people they care about. And honestly, this pressure isn't imaginary, like, at all. The thing is, there are men who've opened up once and get mocked for it later in life. Some men who got told they were too emotional, and there are men who learned the hard way that vulnerability can sometimes change how people see you. Now, in hindsight, this obviously doesn't mean, never open up, but it explains why many of us become overly cautious, because emotionally, some of us just associate vulnerability with risk. In addition to experiencing pressure to keep quiet, friendships with the homies are just often built differently from female friendships. I'm not trying to be sexist or make comparisons or anything, but a lot of male friendships revolve around activities, humor, games, sports, which artists are the hottest, maybe, and just fucking around sometimes. Of course, there isn't anything inherently wrong with what I'm saying, but many men don't grow up regularly practicing emotionally vulnerable conversations with friends. And some do, maybe, yeah, but many don't. A guy can know his friends for 10 years and still barely know what's happening in their lives. It sounds insane, but it's very true. Some men genuinely don't know how to initiate emotional or deep conversations without feeling awkward, because emotionally vulnerable moments between men are often treated as rare, serious moments instead of just normal conversations. And the irony behind all of this is that a lot of men secretly want deeper friendships. I mean, I'm one of them, for example. But everybody is waiting for the other person to just break the emotional barrier first. Therefore, nobody does. It's like waiting for an icebreaker that just is never gonna come. Back when I still used to play online games, I was often one of the last people in the party to get off, so the parties would go from like 4 to 5 people to just me and one or at most 2 other people. It was during those late night deep talks that I could, truly understand them for who they are. When I could, truly get an insight into how they actually are as a person, where we're free to just share emotions with each other without any judgment. Speaking of judgment, what kind of emotion causes us to hide emotions in the first place? Fear. And in some cases, it's not necessarily fear of emotions themselves, but instead of fear of how others will react. A lot of guys are terrified of looking weak, being pitied, being rejected, becoming a burden, losing respect, or simply being different. And once someone experiences rejection a few times, they start adapting. Some become emotionally distant, some become hyper-independent, they turn everything into jokes, act cold, some become pick-me's, or whatever. People don't always become emotionally closed because they naturally want to themselves. Sometimes it's a method of self-protection. And honestly, the internet doesn't help with this. Now, it has gotten a lot better over the last few years, but a lot of online spaces still push extreme versions of masculinity, like some sort of red pill YouTubers, for example. The idea that emotions are weakness, vulnerability is pathetic, caring too much makes you soft, and that real men have to be chads or whatever. And emotional control matters, and constant emotional chaos is obviously unhealthy. But there is a massive difference between emotional stability and suppression. One is healthy, and the other eats away at people.
Hey, you're not gonna fail me, are you?
Now, a lot of guys have extremely limited emotional support systems, so instead of opening up across, friends, family, a community, or multiple trusted people, they emotionally depend on a singular person. In most cases, usually a romantic partner. The thing is, when one person becomes your singular, your only emotional outlet, every emotional issue gets concentrated into that relationship. That's partly why breakups hit some men unbelievably hard. They didn't just lose a partner, they lost their emotional safety net, comfort, validation, and their main support system. And since many men struggle to emotionally reconnect elsewhere, some isolate themselves completely afterward. is also why some people say that men only open up to women they love. And for many guys, sadly, that's partially true. Not because they don't value friendships themselves, but because they never learned emotional openness in other environments. Modern internet culture also complicates things, to say the least. Now, people constantly perform versions of themselves online. Creators want to appear confident, attractive, successful, or emotionally unbothered, especially men. A lot of guys feel pressure to always look composed, and you'll constantly see messages like never chase, never care too much, never show weakness, stay cold. And some of this advice exists for a reason. Overdependence and emotional stability genuinely can become unhealthy, but internet culture often swings things way too far and turns emotional numbness into a personality trait. A lot of guys think that emotional depth is like two sides of a coin, instead of being multifaceted. So eventually some guys go from asking how can they feel something to instead how do they stop feeling things entirely. Now, contrary to popular belief, opening up requires confidence, not insecurity, because vulnerability means accepting uncertainty. You risk misunderstanding, rejection, embarrassment, awkwardness, and emotional exposure. That shit takes courage. And many men were never taught how to handle emotional vulnerability safely, so they avoid it because, yeah, it's scary, but unfortunately, avoidance has consequences. As I previously stated, suppressed or unmanaged emotions don't simply disappear. They just, come out or channel somewhere else. Sometimes through anger, burnout, addiction, isolation, emotional numbness, random breakdowns, or straight up self-destructive behavior. People think emotions disappear when they're ignored, when they usually just change form.
Oh shit.
After going through all of this, I have to clarify that it's not only men that go through this, and not necessarily all guys go through this either. However, there's another important nuance here. Emotional openness doesn't mean telling everyone every single little detail about your life. Of course, that's not healthy because you're violating your own right to privacy. Yes. However, being emotionally open does not mean trauma dumping constantly either, or relying on others for every emotion, losing emotional control, or making vulnerability your entire personality. Healthy vulnerability means understanding your emotions, communicating honestly, trusting people carefully, and expressing struggles without shame. A balanced person can be emotionally strong and emotionally open at the same time. They're not necessarily opposites or independent of each other. In fact, truly emotionally mature people are usually capable of both things. At the core of this entire issue, though, is isolation. A lot of men feel emotionally alone, even when surrounded by people. And that kind of emotional isolation changes people. It can make them colder, quieter, angrier, or more detached, less expressive and hopeful, even. Some men spend years believing nobody would understand them if they opened up. Others convince themselves they shouldn't need help at all. And some genuinely become scared of emotional intimacy because they're so unfamiliar with it and it seems alien to them. But humans are social. Even highly independent people still need some sort of connection. And obviously, as I've proven in this video, despite stereotypes, men need emotional support too. Not because men are weak, but because they're human. So at the end of the day, why do guys struggle to open up? Because many of them learned emotional suppression before they were actually taught emotional understanding first. Because vulnerability feels risky and judgment can, and in some cases, unfortunately, does leave scars. Because emotional skills require practice. Because masculinity gets tied to emotional silence. Because men fear losing respect. And because some genuinely don't know how to express what they feel anymore. But emotional openness is not weakness. If anything, some of the strongest people are the ones actually capable of being honest about themselves. Not performatively or in an exaggerated manner, just honestly. The goal isn't for men to become emotionally exposed all the time. The goal is emotional health, to be able to process emotions, trust people appropriately, and handle vulnerability without shame. Because staying emotionally close forever doesn't make someone strong. Sometimes it simply makes them lonely. And a lot of men are way lonelier than they admit. Stay strong, guys, and as always, I'm out.